Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the transatlantic SF-OP40 RHAL, and also known as the global door number TH1112 aluminum right hand. This global item and the transatlantic item, they are literally the identical item, just two different part numbers owned by the same company. This video is going to serve as visual and dimensional evidence of the item. There are no installation instructions provided with this from the manufacturer, but we can really derive what's happening because you can only install it really one way, given a couple of one real thing that you need to know. So what we're dealing with here is we're dealing here with a right-hand pivot. They're not reversible. We're dealing with a pivot that's for an Armalite type door. So if you know that you have an Armalite door and it looks a lot like what we are about to review, you've got the right pivot. So we know it's right-hand. Armalite, maybe. The video and dimensional review will help determine if we're on the right track. It's aluminum. And, most importantly, that you have a 1/8 of an inch recessed installation, meaning when you're on the pull side of the door and you run your hand over the face of the door and frame, the door needs to be 1/8 of an inch recessed into the frame, not flush. If you have a flush condition, this is not the right pivot. Now, let's start at the bottom of the opening and review the pieces and take a look at all the parts. Okay, here is the floor portion, and let's start with the floor portion. Okay, so here's this bottom portion. You can tell immediately by looking at this that it's a right hand, and there's no way to reverse this. The door is going to sit out here, and it's going to swing this way. So from your perspective, you're looking at a left-hand reverse door, aren't you? The hinges are on the left of your view, and it swings out this way. From my perspective, it's a right hand, but these aluminum storefronts, they generally swing out, don't they? So if you have a left-hand reverse door, you need to order a right-hand pivot. If you have a right-hand reverse door, you need to order a left-hand pivot. Now, let's do some dimensional properties. These types of pivots are called offset, and that is because the vertical axis of pivoting is offset from the face of the door, a specific dimension. There are only two types of, well, there are two common offsets. There's one really common, and then there's the other one. That's 3/4 inch. Once this is installed, and if you stuck the tape measure on the face of the door, and you went to the vertical axis of pivoting of this stud, that imaginary vertical line, that dimension would be 3/4 inch. That's where this 3/4 inch offset comes into. The other size is 1.5 inches, by the way, and they don't really have 1.5 inch offsets when it comes to, there are no 1.5 inch offsets when it comes to this type of hardware, low-cost pivot hardware for aluminum storefronts. However, if you had a need in a new installation for 1.5 inch offset because you had an unusual wall condition where you wanted to take that door and open it past 90, you want to kick that vertical axis of pivoting out further so that when the door is opened, there's a greater space between the inside face of the door, well, what would be the outside face, but the inside face of the door and the wall. So if you have an installation that requires that, we're not going to use low-cost pivots. We're going to use commercial-grade, heavy-duty caliber 1.5 inch offset pivots. Anyway, that's a talk about why these are called 3/4 inch offset. It's simply the dimension from the face of the door to the center line of the vertical axis of pivoting. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Dimensional properties, and we're going to work our way from the bottom up. Overall width of the bottom, about 2 15/16. Overall width, about 2 inch. Overall height of this leg that goes to the frame, about 2 1/16 or so. Okay. Width of that portion, about 1 1/16 inches. Up over here, you can see it's about 5/8 of an inch. Thickness of that item, about 5/16. Thickness of the base, where the spindle goes into, about 1/2 of an inch. Gets a little thinner on this side, So the use, about 5/16. So the use of 1/8 of an inch refers to two things when it comes to this pivot. Number one, inset. We talked about that. Number two, you can loosen the set screw that's here and adjust this to kick that up to 1/8 of an inch. You get the door vertically positioned where you like it, tighten the set screw, and your job is complete. Okay. Moving up the door is what we're doing. Here's the door portion at the bottom. Obviously, you see how that's going to work. Okay. That's obviously the bottom. Ball bearing raceway that's in there. And it really always amazes me how durable these pivots are given the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cycles for such an inexpensive piece of hardware. Overall height about 2 1/4. Overall width about 1 3/8. Overall projection about 1 1/4. Now let's take the screw hole locations from the beveled top edge down to the center of the first hole, about 5/8, and then down to 1 3/4 on the bottom hole. Okay. Moving up the door, we're going to get to the door portion for the header, which is here. That's probably going to be practically identical. It should be identical in size, in fact. Here we go. Overall height, 2 1/4. Overall width, 1 3/8. Overall projection, 1 1/4. Spindle, that projection, about 1/2 of an inch. That's probably about 3/8 diameter. 7/16 maybe. Measuring this one from the underside of the piece that's pointed towards the header, 3/8 down to 1 5/8. Okay. Now you have your head portion. Obviously available as left hand. Obviously available also in dark bronze. Now the header portion. And obviously that's what that's going to look like. Vertical axis of pivoting. A plumb bob or an imaginary line hung from the center of the header portion all the way down to here. That's the vertical axis of pivoting. Going to look like that. Okay. Now, let's take dimensions on the head piece. This will be notched into the face of the header. So if you were to open the door and look up at the underside, you'll see those 3 holes for these screws. If you were to remove those, you'll pull this out and there will be a notch in the face of the header. This is offset because the thickness of the aluminum of the headpiece is what picks up the difference here. Dimensional properties, let's go for it. Overall width, about 2 1/2. Overall height at the beveled end, about 1 3/8. Over maximum thickness of the headpiece, about 3/4 inch. This portion here, where it's going to slide into the frame, that looks about 7/16. Let's take dimensional locations from the underside of here. To that first hole, you're about 9/16. Both of them. The next two are 1 1/8. Okay. Measuring the center line. About 1/4 inch down to about 7/8. And that one we're going to say just is in the center of that position. Let's take a dimension of it because we can. 1/2 inch. Okay. Everything else that you get is going to be fastener related. You'll get those 3 flathead screws for what you're putting in here into the header. You're going to get bolts, a couple of bolts, and plastic anchors to go down through these countersunk holes, these 2 long screws that you see, the 2 plastic anchors that you see. You're going to have hex cap screws for holding on the inside of the door to the back of both door portions, lower and upper. Then you're going to have flathead screws to hold this onto the jamb. Okay, so this is secured literally in the frame, which this will slide in behind, and the 2 bolts down to the ground. That concludes everything. Let's look at the rest of the extended description information. Made for Armalite doors up to 125 pounds, engineered and designed for durability, style, and ease of installation. That's true. Weather-resistant aluminum case construction, 1/8-inch vertical adjustment, full race bearing and design, provides smooth operation on bottom pivot door portion. No sag. The entire weight of the door rests on the bottom pivot, which of course is resting on Mother Earth. Pivots are very efficient in that regard, that they can really hold a lot of weight because nothing's hanging on anything, it's sitting on the floor, generally. Tamper-proof. You can't get to these pivots when the door is in the closed and locked position. You just can't do it. Okay. The door has to be open for you to start to work on the door itself. Unlocked and in the open position. That top portion is non-handed. The bottom portion is for sure handed. 2 finishes. Dark bronze and aluminum. Then, of course, left-hand reverse for a right-hand door. Right-hand reverse for a left-hand door. Just think along in terms of that. There will be a link below this video to a handing chart that you'll be able to review that information. Finally, if you have any questions on the Global Door TH1111, the Global Door TH1112 Armalite right-hand aluminum, or the Transatlantic SF for storefront dash OP for offset pivot 40 means Armalite, RH for right-hand dash AL for aluminum, or any other global, transatlantic, Imperial product. I think Imperial owns those 2 names or trademarks. Do let us know. Be happy to help you with that. Thank you.